Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys. One of the most iconic quotes from Peter Jackson's films. Immediately after Ugluk utters those words, the orcs present start engaging in what can only be described as an orgy of cannibalism. Lovely. It's worth noting that this scene doesn't happen in the books. There is no legendary quote, there are no moments where you go, hey, wait, does this mean orcs have menus? And there is no cannibalism. Speaking of the lovely topic of cannibalism, are Tolkien's orcs actually cannibals? It might surprise you to hear that there aren't any scenes anywhere in Tolkien's writings where orcs eat each other. Case closed, orcs aren't cannibals. Okay, not really. While we never witnessed cannibalism in the books, there are several references to it, and unfortunately, none of these references confirm or deny the theory because they're a little conflicting. The first reference comes from the Two Towers. It's from the Uruk-hai chapter, where a captive Merry and Pippin are witness to tensions between Ugluk's Isengard Uruk-hai and Grishnak's Mordor Orcs. It's one of my favourite chapters in all of Lord of the Rings. This is a bit from Ugluk's dialogue. We are the fighting Uruk-hai, we slew the great warrior, we took the prisoners, we are the servants of Saruman the Wise, the white hand that gives us man flesh to eat. He continues on for a little longer, and then Grishnak responds. Grishnak insults Ugluk and also Saruman, and then finishes his little speech with this. Swine, is it? How do you folk like being called swine by the muckrakers of a dirty little wizard? It's orc flesh they eat. A warrant? Many loud yells in orc speech answered him, and the ringing clash of weapons being drawn. This little argument results in a short fight, where Ugluk proceeds to behead two of Grishnak's soldiers. But this is an interesting little passage. Ugluk boasts that Saruman feeds the Uruk-hai man flesh. To them, this is evidently something to be proud of and a symbol of status. However, Grishnak's response is that Saruman is probably actually feeding them orc flesh. From the immediate reaction of the orcs present, this appears to be a massive insult, and to Ugluk it's evidently worth killing over. So from this short little segment, we get the impression that cannibalism amongst orcs is taboo, and accusing someone of partaking in it is actually a massive insult. I mean, it's not too different from us humans. If someone legitimately accused you of cannibalism, you'd probably be enraged as well. Or confused. I imagine most people watching this have never been in a situation where cannibalism was a legitimate option, but you get the point. It would be a major insult, and if you're a somewhat temperamental person, you might even kill them and possibly eat them afterwards. Wait, no. Unfortunately, it's not an open and shut case, and that is thanks to a certain orc named Shagrat, commander of the Orcish garrison at Cirith Ungol. In the Two Towers and in The Return of the King, Shagrat has some cannibalistic tendencies. Upon discovering Frodo after he's been paralysed by Shelob, an orc named Gorbag, who is commanding a company of Morgul orcs, suggests that Frodo should be thrown in the pot, as he's clearly dead. But Shagrat angrily corrects him and says that Gorbag will be thrown in the pot instead if he isn't careful. Afterwards, a fight erupts in Cirith Ungol between Shagrat and Gorbag's orcs, thanks to a feud over Frodo's possessions. During this time, Sam witnesses Shagrat arguing with one of his soldiers named Snaga, and Shagrat, once again, threatens to eat Snaga if he doesn't follow his orders. Snaga runs away instead, so we don't know if Shagrat would have followed through. Shortly afterwards, Shagrat succeeds in killing Gorbag and licks his bloody knife in triumph. Kind of weird, but also kind of cool. Alright, so Shagrat either just loves making references to eating people, or he's genuinely into it. He does lick a bloody knife, suggesting that he's into it, but we don't actually see him eat anyone either, and after the skirmish at Cirith Ungol, he's in a tower surrounded by dead orcs, and he doesn't dig in. But maybe he wasn't hungry. From the limited interactions we see between orcs, they can barely go a sentence without threatening violence against one another, so it's also entirely possible that Shagrat just has a perverted sense of humour, or has a very specific way of getting his point across. Those are the only references to orcs practicing cannibalism in The Lord of the Rings, and from what I know, there aren't any direct references anywhere else in Tolkien's writing. So we could say that the answer is inconclusive, but I feel like that's a cop-out. From the references we do have, I feel like the interaction between Grishnak and Ugluk is the stronger of the two scenarios. From that scenario, we can probably come to the conclusion that cannibalism is frowned upon by most orcs, but we can't say it with 100% certainty. Of course, we have to remind ourselves of the fact that orcs, while not being inherently evil, are pretty damn close to it. They are capable of excessive amounts of savagery and brutality, and there aren't really any lows they won't stoop to. It would be odd if cannibalism was where they suddenly drew the line. After all, they need very little provocation to start killing each other, and they have no qualms about eating the dead of their enemies, such as men or elves. If orcs do look down on cannibalism, it's likely because it's a status thing. For example, Ugluk boasts that Uruk-hai get fed man flesh. Clearly, this is supposed to make the Uruk seem superior in the eyes of the other orcs. Ugluk becoming enraged with Grishnak's reply likely isn't because Ugluk finds eating orc flesh a despicable act. It's because to him, Grishnak is implying that he's just your run-of-the-mill, bottom-feeding trash. My personal view is this: there probably isn't large-scale cannibalism amongst orcs because there's simply no evidence for it. But much like our own species, cannibalism probably does take place, and probably at a much higher rate. Orcs probably don't like eating their own kind, but that's probably due to a social status thing, and probably because they taste bad, as opposed to them finding it morally reprehensible. If orcs are put in a situation where cannibalism becomes a legitimate option, they probably wouldn't feel bad about doing it. That's a lot of probablys I'm throwing out. To end this video, I want to refer to another segment of The Return of the King, during the Scouring of the Shire. In Saruman's final moments, he reveals that Grima Wormtongue has murdered Lotho Sackville Baggins, and seems to imply that Wormtongue may have also eaten the body. Lovely. It's never confirmed, so we don't know the truth, but it serves as a reminder that men can also practice cannibalism despite it being widely condemned. So if someone were to ask you whether orcs partake in cannibalism, answer it in the same way that you would answer if someone asked if men partook in cannibalism. Mostly they don't, but sometimes they do. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it or at least found it interesting, and I hope it hasn't awakened any dark thoughts in you. Please don't eat people. Other people will think you are weird, and also it's illegal, but not in a cool way. Thanks to my patrons, Moshtaba Rowe, Mo L, Paul Leone, Patricia, Barbosa, MNCB10, and Andrew Welch. You guys are awesome and definitely won't be getting eaten. Cheers, thanks again, and remember, unfortunately, meat is not back on the menu, boys.